Hello and welcome to your Need to Know JBiz edition for May 29th, coming to you from Meadow Mill. I'm JBiz editor Betsy Boyd. Please feel free to comment and ask us questions in the field below. Today's guest is one of my personal heroes, writer, producer, performer, Laura Wexler. Laura Wexler is a Baltimore-based writer and producer who creates narrative projects based on little-known true stories. She's the co-writer and executive producer of Dinner Party, a virtual reality thriller that won a $100,000 alternate realities grant and world premiered at the 2018 Sundance Film Festival. Her writing credits include Pandora's Box, a one-hour drama pilot sold to Amazon Studios, the narrative nonfiction book Fire and a Canebrake, The Last Mass Lynching in America, and journalism published in the New York Times, the Washington Post magazine, and elsewhere. Producing credits include the Stoop Storytelling series, a popular Baltimore-based live show and podcast featuring ordinary people telling the extraordinary, true tales of their lives. Please read my profile of Laura at jmoreliving.com/jbiz. So I wanted to read that entire bio because what you're doing is so exciting and so rare. And it's all, you do such an array of writing-based work, but it's revolutionary in my view. And I love to celebrate you. We've known each other for a little while now, so I'll try not to gush too much.
Okay.
But I wanted first, because I'm a fiction writer as well as a journalist, and I love the idea of story. And one thing that attracts me to you is that you're drawn to crazy true stories. I like to make up crazy stories. You're drawn to the crazy true ones. So with this film, Dinner Party, you and your partner, your writing partner, Charlotte Stout, homed in on this true story of Betty and Barney Hill, who believed in the 60s, is that right?
Yeah.
That they were abducted by aliens and used hypnosis to try to recreate that experience.
Correct.
How did you decide this is our story?
Mm-hmm.
And then how did you also decided this is right for virtual reality? Because, of course, it's a virtual reality script.
Yeah. Okay. So we first heard about the story when we were doing research for an earlier show that we were writing, which was called Pandora's Box. It was actually based on the true story of a program at Hopkins in the 60s that converted housewives into therapists. And so we did it as part of writing that. We did a whole bunch of research into real life 1960s potential cases that could present to the housewives.
Right.
And so Betty and Barney Hill was going to be one of the cases for this show. So the story of Barney Hill is that they were an interracial couple. They lived in New Hampshire, and they took a trip to Niagara Falls. They were coming back in the fall of 1961 through the White Mountains, which is, I was just there this summer and went to the spot where they believe themselves to have been abducted. And it's a remote. I mean, the White Mountains are quite remote, and they were even more remote in 1961. So they're coming home. They see a bright light. They first think it's a plane, but then it's not moving like a plane. And eventually they wake up down the road several hours later having lost time. Mm-hmm. They don't know what happened to them. They are not people inclined to high drama. So he was a postal delivery person and a worker in the civil rights movement in New Hampshire, who was part of the Civil Rights Commission. She was a social worker. So these were people like you and I. And so their first thought was not to run out and tell everybody, hey, we've been abducted by aliens. They didn't know what happened, and it really troubled them. Mm-hmm. They felt like they remembered some things, but not others. And so this is what eventually drove them to get regressive hypnosis, in which a psychiatrist put them in a deep hypnotic state separately. Mm-hmm. And then they took them back to that night. Each recalled what they had experienced. And then at the end of the session, the amnesia was reinstated. So neither knew what the other had said, nor did they know what they themselves had said, until they were given the tapes of these hypnosis sessions at the end of their time with a psychiatrist.
Right.
And so in the true story, they got these tapes and they were afraid to listen to them alone. So they went to a house of a friend and listened to them. And it was a very intense experience for them.
Yeah.
So
have you heard the tapes?
Yes, you can hear the tapes of Barney Hill on YouTube, actually. If you Google Barney Hill hypnosis tapes, you can listen to them. And it's really terrifying to listen to them. So anyway, for us, in terms of why this was a good story and why it was a good story for VR,
right?
It was a good story because...
Which means virtual reality.
Virtual reality, sorry. It was a good story because it worked on a bunch of different levels. So it was a UFO abduction. Who doesn't like that movie?
Sure.
It was a story about a marriage, and in particular, an interracial marriage. And I'm really interested in stories about race.
Right.
And it was a story from the 60s that felt very current in the sense that when you listen to the hypnosis tapes, it sounds like a traffic stop. It sounds like cell phone audio from a traffic stop. And so for us, this was a story that really had currency in 2017 when we were writing it. It still does, sadly, in 2018, basically a story about how different it is to be black and white in America. And regardless of whether you think they were actually abducted or you just think they were abducted, they had really different experiences. And for us, that was because of who they were in America.
Yeah.
And so in terms of the virtual reality aspect, virtual reality is a perfect genre for something that is individual, is isolating, is ineffable, is all-encompassing. So all these words describe virtual reality, and they also describe a UFO abduction or an alien abduction. So for us, it was like, hey, there's this newish genre, virtual reality. We've never done it before, but the people who are veterans have only been doing it a couple of years, so it's still wide open. Why don't we try it with this story?
Right.
That was a really long answer, but...
No, it's great. It's interesting, and because it was such an immersive experience for each of the hills. You can tell that individualized story through virtual reality.
So, in the film, you attend, the film takes place at a dinner party at Betty and Barney Hill's house where, unbeknownst to him, she's going to play these tapes.
Yeah.
And she plays the tapes, and as soon as she presses play on this old reel-to-reel tape recorder, it triggers the sort of abduction experiences of each of them.
Okay.
So you experience both of theirs and see really how different they are.
Yeah. Okay, so it's this ontological wonderland. You're going into all of these different corners, and
it's really subjective. It's a very subjective genre.
Right.
So it seemed useful for that. So Dinner Party is the pilot for a whole series we want to do called The Incident, where we would take a real life supernatural event and look at the social and psychological issues that really underpin it, as well as the sort of kooky supernatural events.
Right. Well, I do want to make one announcement, but first, just to acknowledge, it seems important that these stories they're true, and you're talking about politics and culture, but at the same time, what's so wonderful to me as a creative writer is that you're entertaining on such a grand scale. The spectacle of these stories is amazing. So I don't see how you can fail.
The storytelling is so important. It's like I want to tell a story on a couple different levels.
Right.
And
this is so layered.
Yeah.
Like the best writers tell you every story is about two things. And it seems like these are about possibly three big things. So let me make a brief announcement, Laura, which is, if you're just joining us, this is J Moore's Need to Know, JBiz Edition on Facebook Live. I'm guest editor Betsy Boyd, which I don't even have to read. I know that. And I'm joined today by Laura Wexler.
You know it, girl.
I own it. Be sure to share, like, and follow it. #JBiz. Read more about Jewish entrepreneurs at jmoreliving.com/JBiz. Let me ask, what's next?
So I just finished a script for a feature film that I would really love to get made, and it's based on a 1924 racial passing case in which a husband who is a member of a powerful aristocratic New York family in the 20s secretly marries a woman, and then weeks later sues her to annul the marriage because he claims she defrauded him by not telling him she had colored blood. So there's a true story, there's a trial, it's a love story, and it's really an exploration of both the tragedy and the absurdity of American racism.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Well, we could talk about that for about 3 hours. But with virtual reality, what's next in that arena?
Yeah. So this incident is basically what we're hoping to, get Dinner Party to be bought by a distributor who would then fund us to make these additional episodes. So each episode would look at a different supernatural incident. So the next one we want to do is the case of a woman who in 1974, Culver City, claims that she was raped by a ghost. And so we would look at that as a Me Too story.
Yeah, that blows my mind. You mentioned that when we were doing the interview for the magazine. It's so upsetting but so fascinating.
Yeah, I think it's a different way. It's just interesting to take a current lens and look at a historical event through something that's really of the moment. So that's happening. And then with Dinner Party itself, there are a couple different ways it's getting out in the world. One will be on a headset, just how people put on the headset watch.
Although, as we talked about, not many people have the headset.
Not yet, but I think that will change.
So will it be like the VHS in the 80s where at first it seemed like only the rich families had it and then suddenly everybody had 3?
Yeah, I think so, except maybe the difference is that the people who have headsets now are typically the people who are gamers because they've been playing video games in virtual reality for so long. So I think that just needs to trickle down to the rest of us who are not gamers or not early adopters. But the other way I think pieces like Dinner Party are being seen is as location-based experiences. So they're called LBEs.
Okay.
And so that's where you would go someplace. In our case, you would enter a dining room that is dressed like the dining room in the film, the dining room of Betty and Barney Hill. You sit down at a table, you put on the headset. So it's virtual reality and reality. So it's immersive theater and VR. So there's lots of really interesting stuff going on in that realm. LBE, location-based experiences. And I think that's really, it's like people are all about experiences right now.
Right.
It's not just, they don't just want a story. They don't just want, it's like, what's the experience?
And you'll continue doing the stoop.
Yes,
correct?
Yes.
That's not going away.
No,
that's still a big part of your life.
Experience. Right. Exactly. Yeah.
I love how these things all thread together with such unity. And yet, as I said at the top of the show, you're going into such new territory with everything you do. You're a pioneer. You're a revolutionary. It was a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you.
But let me make one more announcement.
Please do.
If I can refrain from giggling. Thanks for joining me this month for your Need to Know JBiz edition, which concludes today. Don't forget to comment, like, share, and follow at #JBiz. And go to jmoreliving.com/JBiz for more Jewish entrepreneur stories. Additionally... Sorry. It's just a lot, I feel like I'm reading the disclaimer on a drug ad suddenly, but it's all good information. Go to jmoreliving.com/JBizTix to learn more about our June 13th networking event. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's been a lot of fun, obviously. And I'm really not drunk or stoned. I just seem like that sometimes.
I am stoned. Just kidding.